The restaurant is losing money. We need to shut it down before it drains what's left of Dad's estate, my brother Vincent said, sliding papers across the table toward me, with the practiced sympathy of someone who'd rehearsed this moment in front of a mirror. I know it's hard to accept, but the numbers don't lie. Sign over your share, let me handle the liquidation, and at least you'll walk away with something instead of nothing. His wife Melissa nodded solemnly beside him, dabbing her eyes with a tissue as if the failure of our father's life's work genuinely pained her. She wore a new diamond tennis bracelet that caught the light every time she moved. Strange accessory for a woman supposedly devastated by financial ruin. But why did I hesitate instead of signing immediately? And why, 3 weeks later, did I walk into our family meeting with a forensic accountant whose findings made my mother collapse in her chair? Let me start from the beginning. My father built Romano's over 42 years. Starting as a tiny pizza shop in a strip mall with 6 tables and a temperamental oven, it had grown into a local institution. The place where families celebrated anniversaries, where couples got engaged over candlelight and red wine, where generations returned, decade after decade, to remember the meals that had marked their most important moments. Dad died 18 months ago. Heart attack, sudden and final. In the kitchen he'd loved more than almost anything. He left the restaurant to Vincent and me in equal shares. Vincent had been managing the day-to-day operations for years, while I lived 3 states away, building my career as a forensic accountant. Ironic, really. The very skill that would eventually unravel my brother's scheme was the same career he'd always dismissed as playing with other people's numbers instead of making your own. The arrangement had seemed natural at the time. Vincent was on site. He knew the staff, understood the business, had Dad's recipes memorized. I was busy with my own life, my own clients, my own problems. I trusted him completely. That was my first mistake. When Vincent called 6 weeks ago claiming the restaurant was hemorrhaging money, I believed every word. "The pandemic hit us hard," he said, his voice heavy with apparent grief. "We never fully recovered. Costs are up, revenues are down, and we're bleeding cash every month. I've been trying to keep it going for Dad's memory, but I can't keep covering the losses from my own pocket." "How bad is it?" I asked. "We'll be bankrupt in 6 months if we don't close now, but if you sign over your share, I can sell the building, the equipment, the liquor license, maybe salvage $200,000 for each of us instead of nothing." The documents he'd sent supported his story. Monthly statements showing consistent losses, expense reports documenting rising costs, a trajectory that painted a picture of a business in terminal decline. I had the pen in my hand. I was ready to sign. Then I heard my father's voice, not literally, of course, but the memory of him, sitting at this same kitchen table when I was struggling through my first year of accounting school. "Never sign anything without understanding it completely," he'd told me, "especially when family is involved. Blood doesn't make people honest, sweetheart. It just makes betrayal hurt more." I set down the pen. "I need more time to review the documents," I told Vincent over the phone. He was frustrated but didn't push. Pushing would have seemed suspicious. "Fine. Take a week, but don't wait too long. The creditors are circling." That night, I read every page he'd provided. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't identify what. The statements looked professional. The trajectory was plausible. The story was believable. Too complete, too convenient. The next morning, I called a colleague. Sandra Williams specialized in family business fraud. I'd worked with her on 3 cases over the years, and I trusted her instincts. "Unfortunately, this is common," she told me during our initial consultation. "One sibling manages the business. The other trusts them implicitly, and money disappears through methods that wouldn't survive professional scrutiny." "You think my brother is stealing from the restaurant?" "I think the documents he showed you are inconsistent with publicly available information about your father's business. Property tax records suggest the restaurant's assessed value has increased, not decreased. Health inspection reports show consistent high ratings and busy service observations. Yelp and Google reviews from the past year describe packed weekend crowds. But the financial statements show a business about to collapse." She paused. "Those 2 pictures don't match. So the financials are fabricated? Probably created specifically to convince you to sign away your ownership. The question is what the real financial statements show." Getting the real books took 3 weeks. Sandra subpoenaed bank records, credit card processing statements, and supplier invoices. She interviewed former employees, carefully, without alerting Vincent, about customer volume and business operations. She reconstructed a picture of Romano's financial reality that bore no resemblance to what my brother had shown me. "The restaurant is thriving," she concluded, spreading her findings across my dining room table. Year-over-year growth of 12%, profit margins well above industry average. A customer base that's actually expanded since your father's death because, she paused, checking her notes. According to staff, Vincent invested in marketing and renovations. Then why is he claiming it's failing? Because he's been stealing the profits. Sandra pulled out a diagram showing money flows like a circulatory system. Every month, substantial amounts are transferred from the restaurant's operating account to a series of shell companies. Those companies pay invoices to your sister-in-law's boutique, Melissa's Designs. What invoices? What could a boutique possibly sell to a restaurant? Consulting services, interior design, marketing materials. Sandra shook her head. The invoices are vague enough to seem plausible, but specific enough to justify large payments. Over the past 3 years, approximately $760,000 has been funneled from Romano's to Melissa's boutique through this mechanism. $760,000. My share of the restaurant, stolen through fake invoices and corporate shells, while my brother looked me in the eye and asked me to give up my inheritance. "There's more," Sandra said. "The shell companies are registered in both their names. The transfers required both their signatures. This wasn't one person's mistake, it was a coordinated scheme." I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of betrayal settle over me like a physical thing. My brother, the person who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd held my hand at our grandmother's funeral, who'd promised Dad at the very end that he'd take care of the family business. He'd been robbing me for 3 years, and he'd almost gotten away with it. The family meeting was scheduled for Sunday afternoon. Vincent had arranged it to finalize the closure of the restaurant. He'd invited our mother, our aunt and uncle, several cousins, anyone who might pressure me into signing if I showed signs of hesitation. He expected me to arrive alone and overwhelmed. I arrived with Sandra Williams and 3 banker's boxes of documentation. "What is this?" Vincent asked as I set the boxes on the table. "A forensic audit of Romano's financial records." I kept my voice steady, professional, the same tone I used when presenting findings to clients. The real ones, not the version you fabricated to convince me the restaurant was failing. The room went silent. Mom looked between us, confused. Melissa's hand went to her new tennis bracelet. "I don't know what you're talking about," Vincent said, but his voice had lost its practiced confidence. "You've been stealing from our father's business for at least 3 years. I opened the first box and pulled out the bank statements. You've funneled over $700,000 to Melissa's boutique through fake invoices and shell companies. You've been lying to me, to Mom, to everyone in this room. That's ridiculous. The restaurant is losing money. The numbers I showed you are real. The restaurant made $320,000 in profit last year alone." I slid the documents across the table. "I have the real numbers, Vincent. Every transfer, every fake invoice, every dollar you diverted to your wife's business while telling us Dad's legacy was dying." My mother looked at the papers, then at Vincent. Her face had gone pale. "Vincent, is this true?" He didn't answer. His silence was answer enough. That was when she fainted. The aftermath of the revelation was chaos wrapped in confrontation. Uncle Robert helped revive my mother while Aunt Maria demanded explanations. Melissa attempted to leave, claiming she had nothing to do with financial decisions, but Sandra blocked her path with documentation showing she'd signed every fake invoice. "You're both complicit," Sandra said flatly. "The shell companies are registered in both your names. The transfers required both your signatures. This wasn't one person's mistake. This was a coordinated scheme executed over 36 months. Vincent finally dropped the pretense, his face transformed, the mask of the concerned brother falling away to reveal something harder, uglier beneath. "The restaurant should have been mine entirely," he said, his voice bitter. "I'm the one who worked there for 15 years. I'm the one who managed it when Dad got sick. I'm the one who knows every supplier, every recipe, every quirk of that ancient dishwasher. You moved away, built your fancy career, barely visited except for holidays, and you got half of everything? That's what Dad wanted. Equal shares. Dad was sentimental. He couldn't see that you didn't deserve equal shares. You contributed nothing while I gave my life to that business. I looked at my brother, really looked at him. The resentment in his eyes wasn't new. It had been building for years, decades maybe. I just hadn't seen it, hadn't wanted to see it. So, you decided to steal my share instead of asking for a buyout? Instead of being honest about what you felt you deserved? Would you have given me more? Would anyone? You'd all have told me to accept what Dad decided. Accept that the dutiful son gets the same as the absent daughter. He stood, facing me directly across our mother's antique dining table. I earned that money, Teresa. Every dollar I took, I earned through years of work you never did. You earned the right to steal $760,000 and then try to trick me into signing away my ownership? I earned the right to be compensated for my actual contribution, not split everything with a sister who showed up twice a year for holidays and expected half the inheritance. I took a breath, let it out slowly, kept my voice level. You could have talked to me, Vincent. Any time in the last 15 years. You could have said, Teresa, I feel like I'm putting in more work than you. Can we renegotiate the terms? I would have listened. I might even have agreed. But you didn't ask. You didn't negotiate. You stole. I gathered the documents back into their boxes. And now I'm going to take back what's mine. The legal proceedings took 7 months. I filed civil suits for breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, and conversion of assets. Sandra's documentation was comprehensive enough that Vincent's attorneys advised him to settle rather than risk a jury trial. The settlement required Vincent to transfer his entire share of Romano's to me. He would repay $400,000 of the stolen funds over 5 years. He would resign from any involvement with the restaurant, and he would accept a restraining order preventing him from entering the premises. Melissa's boutique was forced into bankruptcy when the court determined it had received stolen funds. The equipment and inventory were sold, with proceeds applied to the restitution Vincent owed. The criminal referral I filed with the district attorney resulted in charges for fraud and embezzlement. Vincent pleaded to reduced charges, receiving 3 years of probation and community service. Melissa received probation for her role in creating false invoices. They avoided prison. They didn't avoid consequences. My mother's response to the legal proceedings was the hardest part. You're destroying your brother, she told me during one painful conversation at her kitchen table. Whatever he did, he's still family. You should have handled this privately. Privately, he stole over $700,000 and tried to trick me into signing away my inheritance. What private resolution would have been appropriate? Forgiveness, understanding, finding a way to move forward together. He committed crimes, Mom. He lied to my face for months. He was going to steal Dad's entire legacy and leave me with nothing while convincing everyone I'd made a free choice. But the courts, the publicity, the shame, our family name is ruined. Vincent ruined it when he decided to steal. I'm just refusing to be his victim. She couldn't accept it. In her worldview, family loyalty trumped everything, including justice, including truth, including protecting yourself from relatives who would destroy you without hesitation. We stopped speaking for nearly a year after the settlement was finalized. Taking over Romano's was both healing and overwhelming. I hired a general manager to handle day-to-day operations, someone Vincent hadn't selected, someone with no connection to the theft. I reviewed every financial document personally for the first 6 months, establishing controls that would prevent future embezzlement. The staff, most of whom had suspected something was wrong without being able to prove it, welcomed the change in leadership. Several longtime employees shared observations about Vincent's spending, the new car every year, the house renovation, the lifestyle that exceeded what a restaurant manager should have been able to afford. We knew something wasn't right, one veteran server told me. But he was the boss. What could we say? You could have called me. We didn't know you. Vincent always said you weren't interested in the restaurant, that you'd moved on. Another lie, designed to isolate me from information that might have revealed the truth earlier. The restaurant's genuine success became apparent once I had access to accurate information. Without Vincent's theft-draining profits, Romano's generated enough income to fund expansion. I opened a second location 2 years after taking control, then a third. The brand my father had built over 4 decades grew into something larger, a small restaurant group with his name on every door, his photo in every lobby. His recipes, the ones he'd spent a lifetime perfecting, served to thousands of customers who never knew the story behind the business. I named the private dining room at the original location after him, the Antonio Romano Room, a place where families could celebrate the moments that mattered, just as families had been doing at his tables for over 40 years. The expansion wasn't revenge. It was honoring his legacy in a way Vincent's theft had almost prevented. Vincent reached out 3 years after the settlement. His email was brief, carefully worded, probably reviewed by an attorney before sending. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'd like to explain my perspective and, if possible, find some way to move forward. Mom is getting older. She wants her children to be able to be in the same room. For her sake, if not for ours. Could we talk?" I considered the request for a week before responding. "You stole over $700,000 from our father's business. You created fake documents to convince me the restaurant was failing. You tried to manipulate me into signing away my inheritance. And your explanation, when confronted, was that you deserved it because you worked harder. I don't need your perspective. I have 7 months of court records explaining exactly what you did and why. What I needed from you was honesty, and you chose theft and manipulation instead. For Mom's sake, I can be civil at family gatherings, but we're not going to be close again. Trust, once destroyed this completely, doesn't rebuild." He didn't respond. My mother eventually accepted the new reality. Not happily. She still wished I'd handled everything privately, still believed family unity mattered more than justice, but she accepted that her children's relationship was permanently damaged, that holidays would be awkward, that her dreams of a close-knit family had shattered against the rocks of her son's choices. "I blame myself sometimes," she admitted during one conversation years later. "Maybe I favored Vincent too much, made him feel entitled. You didn't make him steal, Mom. That was his choice. But I should have seen it, should have noticed the signs. You trusted your son. That's not a character flaw. His violation of that trust is the problem, not the trust itself." She nodded, though I wasn't sure she fully accepted it. Mothers often struggle to see their children's genuine capacity for harm, even when the evidence is overwhelming. Romano's continues to thrive. 5 locations now, with a 6th opening next summer, a catering division, a line of branded products, sauces, pasta, the signature items my father developed over 40 years of cooking. We've been featured in food magazines, local news segments, one memorable episode of a culinary travel show. I think about him often when I walk through the restaurants, what he would think of the expansion, whether he would approve of how I've handled the business, the family, the betrayal. I believe he would be proud. Not just of the business success, but of my refusal to be victimized by someone who counted on my trust to enable his theft. Never sign anything without understanding it completely, especially when family is involved. He'd known. Somehow he'd known that blood didn't guarantee honesty. That family could hurt you more deeply than strangers because you expected better, because you let your guard down, because you wanted to believe the best about the people who were supposed to love you. The pen I almost used to sign away my inheritance sits in a display case in my office. It's a reminder of how close I came to losing everything, not because I wasn't smart enough to understand the fraud, but because I trusted too easily, because family seemed like it should mean something, because I wanted to believe my brother wouldn't steal from me. The 3 weeks between almost signing and hiring Sandra Williams were the most important weeks of my life. That hesitation, that small voice saying something felt wrong, saved me from a betrayal that would have been complete. Vincent had planned everything perfectly. The fake documents, the emotional appeals, the family pressure, the timing designed to prevent careful review. He'd counted on my trust, my busy schedule, my distance from the business. He hadn't counted on me remembering our father's advice. There's a photo on my desk now that I look at every morning. It's from the original Romanos, taken sometime in the 80s. Dad is standing behind the pizza counter, flour dusting his apron, a huge smile on his face. He's holding 2 children on his hips. Me and Vincent. We must have been 6 and 8, both of us grinning at the camera like we owned the world. I don't remember the moment, but I remember the feeling. The absolute certainty that I was loved, that I was safe, that my family would always protect me. Looking at that photo now, I wonder what our father would say if he could see how it all turned out, if he'd be devastated that his children ended up enemies, if he'd blame himself for not seeing what Vincent would become. I choose to believe he'd understand, that he'd recognize that some people are broken in ways that love can't fix, that you can raise a child with all the right values, and they can still choose to become someone who hurts others for their own gain. I keep the photo not as a reminder of what was lost, but of what was saved, the business he built, the legacy he left, the recipes that continue to bring joy to thousands of people who never knew the hands that first perfected them. That's what I fought for. Not revenge, not vindication, just the chance to preserve something beautiful that someone else wanted to destroy. Vincent is out there somewhere, rebuilding his life, presumably, working some job that doesn't require financial responsibility, living with the knowledge that everyone who matters knows exactly what he did. I don't think about him much anymore. When I do, it's with a kind of distant sadness, not for what he did, but for what he could have been, what we could have been if he'd made different choices. The restaurant industry is full of family businesses that tear themselves apart over money and resentment, brother against brother, parent against child, generations of work destroyed by a single person's greed. Romano's survived because someone was willing to fight for it, because I remembered my father's advice at exactly the right moment, because I didn't let trust override evidence. That's the lesson, I suppose. Trust is beautiful, trust is necessary, but trust should never be blind, and it should never be given to someone who hasn't earned it just because they share your blood. Last week, I got a letter from a woman I've never met. She'd read about our case in a business journal that published an article about family fraud. "I'm in a similar situation," she wrote. "My brother has been managing our family farm for 10 years. Something feels wrong, but I can't prove it. Everyone tells me I'm being paranoid, that he's family, that I should trust him. Your story gave me permission to trust my instincts instead. I've hired an accountant. The preliminary findings are not good. Thank you for speaking publicly about what happened. I thought I was alone." I wrote back immediately, "You're not alone, and your instincts exist for a reason. I hope the investigation reveals that everything is fine and your brother is exactly who you thought he was. But if it doesn't, know that surviving this kind of betrayal is possible. It's painful, but it's possible. And the people who truly love you will understand why you had to protect yourself." That's what I wish someone had told me back when I was sitting at my kitchen table with a pen in my hand and a stack of documents designed to steal my inheritance. Your instincts exist for a reason. Trust them, even when it's family, especially when it's family, because the people who truly love you will never put you in a position where you have to choose between trust and survival. And the people who do? They were never really family at all. Romano's is open 7 days a week. The original location, the one my father built, still has the same brick walls, the same vintage photos, the same red checkered tablecloths he chose 4 decades ago. Every night, families gather around those tables. They celebrate birthdays and anniversaries, first dates and last dinners before someone moves away. They create memories that will last for generations. And somewhere in the back office, in a simple frame on a modest desk, there's a photo of a man with flour on his apron, holding 2 children who once believed they'd be family forever. Some stories don't have happy endings. They have true endings. This is mine. The restaurant is thriving. The legacy is secure. The thief was caught and punished. And I'm still here, still fighting, still building something worth protecting, just like Dad taught me. Never sign anything without understanding it completely, especially when family is involved. I never forgot, and because of that, Romano's never died. That's not revenge, that's inheritance, the real kind.